Hey, what's happening, guys? What's going on? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. In today's video, we're going to be covering the news. We got some business stories to share with you guys. We're going to be talking about the markets. We're going to be talking about real estate and the economy. No sponsors to mention in today's video, but if you want to sponsor a video, the rates are really reasonable. Reach out to me at RulesForRebels@gmail.com. If you got a business, a service, you sell t-shirts, you got a Shopify store you want to promote, hit me up, RulesForRebels@gmail.com. I've been giving some documentary recommendations, YouTube channel shows to watch, etc. I actually got a recipe recommendation for you guys today. This is a recipe I've actually been making for a number of years, but in the past year or so, it's really blowing up on like TikTok and Pinterest and Instagram. It's called the Mississippi pot roast. If you don't got a crock pot, get one. I think everybody should have a crock pot. You can make yourself some good meals. It cooks all day while you're at work or out and about. What this recipe is, you get yourself a chuck roast. You need 1 packet of Hidden Valley Ranch, or if you shop at Aldi like me, whatever the knockoff ranch is, the ranch dressing powder or ranch dip powder. You also need either a pack of brown gravy mix, or you can also substitute, if you got a pack of like French onion dip mix, you can use that as well, and some arancini peppers and a stick of butter. I like to brown the roast first. You don't have to. I normally rub my roast with Gibson seasoning from Costco. Brown it for 2 minutes on each side, and then I throw it in the crock pot. On top of the roast, you're going to dump that packet of Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, powder dressing, I should say. You're going to sprinkle either the brown gravy or the onion powder, whichever one you choose to use, over the top. Then you're going to put a stick of butter on top. You're going to put 7, 8, 9, 10 pepperoncinis on top of it. Then you're going to turn the crock pot on low and leave it for, I would say, at a minimum 8 or 9 hours. The longer you cook it, the more tender it's going to be, the more it's going to fall apart. And so I'd recommend leaving it for 12 or 14 hours. And then you can put it over mashed potatoes. You can put it over rice. Lately, what I've been doing is putting it on sandwiches and dripping the juice all over. And if I really feel like doing it up special, I'll go get some bolillo buns. Put the meat on the bolillo bun, put some cheese on top, throw it in my cast iron skillet, and then put like a Dutch oven or really anything heavy on top, and you can kind of press it like a Cuban sandwich. But super easy to make. The prep time is probably less than 5 minutes, and you can get yourself a nice hearty meal. It's absolutely delicious. So that's my recipe recommendation for you guys. Just Google Mississippi pot roast, and you can find it yourself. So before we get into, I always kind of start off talking about what the markets did yesterday. Before we kind of get into today's stories, this actually wasn't planned as part of today's video. It wasn't supposed to be part of today's, it's not in my notes, but I thought it was interesting. I always think kind of conspiracies are funny. So you guys remember a couple weeks ago, I believe the gentleman's name was Lamar Hamlin, the player on the Buffalo Bills who had the heart issue on the field. Terrible story, right? It's really sad to see a young guy who, accomplished his dreams of making it to the NFL, and his career, looks like his career is over. Really kind of sad story there. Seemed like he was a good dude, too. I'd seen some stuff on his Instagram. He was doing toy drives and food drives for the less fortunate. So it seemed like a good guy. But we had that issue on the field. Obviously, a lot of people thought it maybe had something to do with something he got during the period of the Mexican beer cough. That has been causing a lot of people to kind of have heart issues and strokes and collapse on fields. A lot of kind of doctors on Instagram and the NFL are saying no, it had nothing to do with that. But there's kind of a conspiracy that the NFL is using a body double for him. I saw there was an image posted on Instagram the other day that's supposedly him standing in front of a wall with a mural. I'm not sure if the mural is of him or just some Bills player, but he's got a hoodie on. The hoodie's like over his face, and the way that the shadows are cast, you can't see his face. Well, apparently he made I don't know if it was Monday Night Football or the games over the weekend, but apparently he made an appearance at one of the recent Buffalo Bills games, and he was in one of the skyboxes, and the camera zoomed in on him, but he's got on like a big jacket with a hood. He's wearing like a baklava or a ski mask or something like that, and you couldn't really see him. So a lot of people are kind of speculating that the NFL is doing kind of a body double thing. It kind of reminds me of the whole Tiffany Dover story. If you guys aren't familiar with that, she's the young nurse that collapsed on TV. Nobody has ever really seen her since. I think NBC actually did a podcast, Is Tiffany Dover Still Alive? And, they did this like 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it was, episode long podcast, and they never found her. They never interviewed her. They just said, yeah, we know she's alive. So this Lamar Hamlin thing's kind of reminding me of that. But a lot of people are speculating that he either passed away or he's in such bad shape that he can't be seen on camera. But people are saying it's almost trolling at this point. Like who wears a hood and a face mask inside? The whole thing is just very weird. There's a bunch of Twitter threads going on about it right now. And one of the interesting things about Twitter is before the narratives and discussion you heard on Twitter seem very foreign to what you hear in real life, like your friends, your family, the guy or gal you're behind at the grocery store talking about things. Like they don't talk like people on Twitter talk. And obviously Twitter was being heavily censored. Certain agendas, certain views were being pushed on Twitter. And now that Elon Musk has the reins of Twitter and it's not this kind of like fake platform where all the dialogue is fake, actual real discussions go on. So I saw somebody was like, what are they trying to turn Lamar Hamlin into Wilson from Home Improvement? Remember, Wilson was a guy who he'd always peek over the fence, but you could never really see his face. He'd always have some costume on or some disguise on, or the fence would be blocking the view of his face. People are saying like this Lamar Hamlin thing is just very odd. Let's see, I spent the first 5 minutes of the video. I don't have much time today. I spent the first 5 minutes of the video rambling about Lamar Hamlin and cooking beef roast. So let's get into the news. The Dow closed up yesterday, 104 points. NASDAQ closed down 0.6%. S&P 500 closed down slightly, and most top cryptos closed down 2 to 5%. Bloomberg article, the National Association of Business found through a recent survey that 20% of firms, and this is outside of tech as well, 20% of firms planned on cutting their headcounts in 2023, and of that 20% of firms who are going to cut their headcounts in 2023, 12% said they're going to do so within the next 3 months. So within the next 3 months, between now and April, we're likely to see a lot more layoffs. So another article from Bloomberg that says it's cheaper to rent than buy in 95% of U.S. cities, and that's despite rising rent prices. You know, these high interest rates combined with the historically high home prices, even with the recent pullback, homes are still at historically high prices, and that's making renting cheaper in most cities. Zero Hedge had an article yesterday. Your living standards have declined dramatically. Grocery store prices remain high. And not only that, but the sizes of items you buy continue to shrink, right? Like early on during inflation, companies were practicing quote unquote shrinkflation, which is when, you know, they know that you'll notice the price rising, but if the paper towels you buy can give you 6 less sheets per roll than they used to, they can kind of give you less, save money, and you hopefully won't realize that you're I don't want to say being cheated, but that you're getting less for your money. Well, now we're seeing price hikes and we're seeing shrinkflation happen at the same time. The article went on to mention that Uber and Lyft used to be cheap. Now it costs $40 or $50 just to get across town. Crime is out of control. We talked yesterday about how JP Morgan Chase Bank locations in New York City are having to lock their ATM machines at 5 o'clock when the banks close, which kind of defeats the entire point of ATMs being able to access your money when the bank is closed. And the article went on to say this wasn't done by Putin. This was done by the Fed, who has the legal power to counterfeit. And they kind of gave a good example. They said, imagine if you had a glass of lemonade and you were planning on having a couple of kids over for a party. All of a sudden 50 kids show up at the party, so you got to stretch the lemonade, so you start adding water to the lemonade. At some point there's no lemonade and it just becomes water, and the kids will notice, and it's kind of what we've seen, right? It took people a while to kind of really be affected by the inflation, but it's gotten worse and it lingered and everybody is noticing. The article also went on to say they robbed you to fund their outrageous lockdown experiment and put as many businesses and people on the payroll as possible. They might as well have dropped money from helicopters. Now we're paying the price for this monetary malfeasance. Household saving rates are below pandemic levels. So, during the pandemic, savings rates actually skyrocketed because there was nothing to spend your money on, right? You couldn't really travel, you couldn't go to nightclubs, you couldn't go to bars, you couldn't go to movie theaters. We also had people getting stimulus checks, and a lot of people who maybe previously only made 30, 40 grand a year were making upwards of $54,000, $57,000 a year on unemployment. People were making more money on unemployment than they were previously working, and then we had the stimulus on top of that. So savings rates actually grew during the pandemic. But for the first time, we've seen savings rates drop back down lower to where they were before the pandemic started. Google recently laid off 12,000 workers. We talked about that. A lot of people are criticizing Google for firing people to save $2 or $3 billion, which $2 or $3 billion sounds like a lot of money, but when you consider that Google did 44, almost $45 billion in stock buybacks in 2022, maybe if they had bought a couple billion less back in stock, they wouldn't have had to lay off all these workers. Though I guess ultimately everybody kind of realizes that tech had too many workers. Tech went on a hiring spree, and those people likely needed to be laid off anyways. A lot of people are also mad at Google that they fired people with 10, even 15 years of tenure with an email overnight. Let's see, I think it was yesterday, trading in dozens of stocks on the New York Stock Exchange was halted in the morning, shortly after the market opened on Tuesday due to an apparent technical issue. The major stocks impacted included Morgan Stanley, Verizon, AT&T, Nike, and McDonald's. And according to the New York Stock Exchange websites, many stocks were shown to have abnormally large moves when the market opened, which may have triggered volatility halts. CNBC's Bob Pisani said on Squawk on the Street that the issue appears to be a technical one and not something that happened on the trading floor, and many of the companies impacted resumed trading before 9:45 Eastern Time. The New York Stock Exchange said at roughly 9:50 a.m. that all of its systems were operational. And shit happens, systems go down, but we've been talking in some of these videos recently how it seems like we're less and less able to run complex systems, right? Like the airlines have disasters. Southwest canceled, 15,000 flights the other week. The FAA's air traffic control system went down. That was, a week or two ago. The excuse or the reason we're given is that some employee accidentally deleted the files to the program or something like that. But it's weird that the air traffic control system in Canada wound up going down a couple hours later. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we wind up learning that that was some type of hack. Let's talk about layoffs. We always talk about layoffs in these videos. Vacasa laid off 1,300 employees, 17% of the company. Innovacker laid off 205 employees, 15% of the company. A couple other companies that didn't announce the number of employees laid off were Bolt, Coach Hub, PagerDuty, Partner, Stack, and Scoro. Justin Bieber, 28 years old, recently cashed out his entire catalog for $200 million. So curious to see what he's going to do with that money and do with the rest of his life. We're hearing rumors that Jeff Bezos is going to be selling the Washington Post to buy the Washington Commanders, who were previously the Washington football team and who before that were the Washington Redskins. Kind of a stupid thing there, but during the summer of BLM riots, when everybody was concerned with taking the Indian girl off the butter and taking Miss Butterworth or taking Aunt Jemima off the syrup, everybody decided that the Washington Redskins were a racist name for a football team, so they initially changed it to the Washington Football Team, which was a pretty stupid name, but that has since been changed to the Washington Commanders. But Jeff Bezos is rumored to be selling the Washington Post to free up some money to buy the Washington Commanders. And the Washington Post, the media, newspapers are having a lot of trouble. Washington Post recently laid off 20 newsroom employees, and they're going to be shutting down the gaming section as well. They also were hiring for 30 jobs that they've decided not to fill. Amazon, we got a couple of e-commerce stats or stories for you guys. Amazon customers on average received their orders in 1.5 days compared to 4.4 days of customers of Walmart and Target. Although personally, I've been noticing Amazon packages have been taking a lot longer to get delivered. I normally don't even get things. I rarely order off Amazon, but I rarely get things in the 2 days that Prime promises. Let's see, one's not worth mentioning. Klarna, buy now, pay later is getting big. Klarna, which is based in Sweden, said that the U.S. is now its largest market in terms of revenue, with volumes up 92% year over year. The company has 32 million customers in the U.S., which accounts for more than a fifth of its worldwide user base and represents a 44% year over year increase. I thought this was interesting, right? So we talk about a lot of doom and gloom, a lot of bad news on this channel, but I thought this was an interesting story. Whole Foods wants to triple the number of new stores it opens each year, with plans to open 30 new stores a year, up from 11 in 2022. Whole Foods CEO Jason Buchel also noted that the company is looking at new formats for stores, so new sizes of stores, new shapes of stores. Whole Foods currently has 534 stores around the world, and that kind of flies in the face of, we saw a couple articles a few weeks ago where they were talking about how a lot of people are shopping down. A lot of people who previously maybe shopped at Whole Foods were shopping at discount grocers like Walmart, Aldi, etc. I had a bunch of stuff about Peter Schiff here, but that's kind of a long thing. Maybe we'll save that for another video. 3M stock tumbles after a huge miss despite slashing guidance twice already in the past year. They fired 2,500 employees, and they see significant decline in electronics demand in 2023. The CEO said, "We expect macroeconomic challenges to persist in 2023, according to Chief Executive Officer Mike Roman, who made that statement on Tuesday. The planned job cuts are a necessary decision to align with adjusted production volumes," he said. They've already cut their outlook twice. They actually pay a pretty decent dividend. I think they pay a dividend of over 5%, so that's a stock I was going to be keeping my eye on. Microsoft has given up all of its after-hours gains after the CFO warned in a conference that sales in the current quarter will come in at least $1 billion lower than Wall Street expectations, as a December slowdown is projected to continue into the new year. This is kind of interesting. California wants to tax people for leaving the state. California is facing a $24 billion budget deficit, and people are leaving. What they want to do, they want to impose a 1.5% annual tax on people with a worldwide net worth above $1 billion, starting as early as 2024. And a lot of people might say, "Oh, yeah, we should tax billionaires." However, 2 years later, that threshold drops from $1 billion down to $50 million. And well, billionaires, let's see what I have here. Okay. So I guess the point being, this will cause wealthy people to leave the state, and it will prevent other wealthy people from moving into the state, which will put California in an even worse position. And I can almost guarantee that a few years down the road, that 50 million is going to be dropped to 20 million, is going to be dropped to 10 million. And next thing you know, people with a couple $1 million in California are going to be taxed for living there or taxed for leaving there. U.S. gas prices are expected to rise. According to AAA, gasoline prices continue to climb throughout the U.S. Gas prices are up 11.8 cents over a week ago. The Department of Justice hit Google with an antitrust suit over their ad market and calls for a corporate breakup. Tesla announced a $3.5 billion production facility for semi-trucks in Nevada. There was a big story that came out. Okay, so I guess German intelligence put out a report. They're alarmed that Ukraine is losing hundreds of soldiers every day. And there were also a bunch of articles. Ukraine was rocked by a corruption scandal. A bunch of top presidential advisors and deputies wound up stepping down. A lot of this U.S. tax money that's going over to fund the war in Ukraine is actually being used to fund luxury car purchases of mansions, shopping sprees, and travel for a lot of the connected people in Ukraine. Ukraine is and has always been a very corrupt country. Most people in the U.S. couldn't point out Ukraine on a map, and I actually saw an interesting chart the other day where people from the U.S. were asked to point out Ukraine for a map. I mean, some people were putting check marks in the U.S., China, Europe. Nobody knows anything about Ukraine, but everybody is quick to want to send our money over to support Ukraine, even as our infrastructure at home is crumbling, even though we have people here in the U.S. suffering. Early on during the Ukraine-Russia conflict, we heard about all these companies pulling out, right? Like Nissan just gave up their company to the Russians. I think McDonald's wound up closing down or shutting down their franchises there. Turns out that was, the media made a big deal about that. But in reality, over 90% of companies have remained in Russia. So the news of a mass exodus of Western firms from Russia was largely exaggerated. In 2022, Australia saw a 17% increase in heart attacks in millennials. Facebook welcomes back the neo-Nazi Azov regiment. Back in 2019, they were actually banned as being a dangerous hate group, but they are welcome back on Facebook. And I think that's kind of all the news for today. I apologize, today's video was kind of rushed. My notes were a bit scattered. We got a bunch of snow here, and I had a busy night last night and a busy day today. So I wanted to get a video out. Today's video was a little bit kind of scattered. I'll try to get a better one out for you guys tomorrow. But if you guys enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below and ring the bell. As always, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts, comments, and opinions. So drop those down below as well. And I'll catch you guys on tomorrow's video. Later, guys. Have a good day.